All right. Hello, everyone. I'm Steph from OpenVC, and welcome to our very first GP Roast. I hope everybody's ready. Today, we are going to see a roast. We're going to see pitch decks from consenting GPs being roasted by a top LP that we're going to introduce in a few seconds. And that's a first for us, and I think for a lot of people. So we hope you're going to enjoy it, and forgive us in advance if there are some little blips and blops on the way. Before we get started, a few points. So number one, a quick reminder on OpenVC. We are an open platform where tech investors can receive qualified deal flow before it's on Crunchbase. You can find us at openvc.app. And if you want to get involved, if you want to receive deal flow, you can get in touch with me here. We're also raising an angel round right now, so feel free to get in touch. Number two, if you want to get roasted, if you want to be on the next roast, you can sign up on this form here, openvc.app/blog/gproast. We are going to roast 3 decks per month for the next few months with top GPs every time. So take the opportunity. Third, and this one is important, this event is live streamed right now on YouTube, Twitter, LinkedIn. So I count on you. Please hit the like, hit the comment, say something. We just want to mess with the algorithm, create engagements, and make sure to reach as much people as we can. The fourth one is the boring one, but I have to do it. My attorney, who is a great guy, but he insists that I show you this disclaimer. So here it is. This is an educational event. This is not a fundraising event. Be careful with your money, don't take risks, and you're responsible for what you guys do. So now you've heard it, I've done my job, and Com can sleep peacefully tonight. All right. And the last point, just want to say hello to sponsor Vauban.io. You guys probably know them. They're a great platform if you need to set up an SPV or set up a fund. They've just released a new product called Atom, which is super cost efficient. So you may want to check them out, Vauban.io. To set up a fund or an SPV. And now, today, I'm actually not going to be the one doing the roast. This is the privilege of the LP. And I will be focused on, keeping an eye on the timer and all the technical stuff in the background. So I needed some help. And for that, I asked my good friend Muieen, the LP guy, to come on stage and play the role. And he accepted. So Muieen, thank you for joining us.
Hi, thanks so much for having me, Steph. As a lot of you guys probably know, I write a blog on Medium on LP and GP fundraising. We've also recently launched Mega LP List. Our goal here today is to make it easier for emerging managers to understand what LPs are looking at when they pitch to those LPs. Excited to bring transparency into how LPs approach this process. Thanks again for having me.
Muieen. So Muieen will be running the conversation with the LP. And just about the agenda now, so we have 3 pitch decks to go through, 12 minutes each, and at the end, depending on how much time we have left, we'll take some questions from the audience. So please don't hesitate. This is a collaborative roast, right? It's 2023 almost. So leave some comments, ask questions, and we'll take them at the end. I think we spoke enough. I think it's time to introduce the man of the day, the myth, the legend, Philipp, if you want to join us.
Hi,
Philipp.
Thanks for having me.
Welcome to the show. Would you like to say a few words about yourself?
Absolutely. So I'm Philipp. I'm the co-founding managing partner of Blue Future Partners. We set out back in 2015 with the thesis that emerging managers with small fund sizes focusing on the early stages of VC outperform and built a fund-of-fund platform around that. So ever since, we've invested in around 35 GPs with 50 plus funds, including re-ups. We have a global mandate. A fair share of them are based in the US, but we also invest in Europe, Israel, China, Southeast Asia, and most recently India. So yes, very glad to be here and happy to commence the roasting whenever we're ready. Steph.
Awesome. Thanks, Philipp. We're happy to have you. and we count on you. So we call this a roast, but of course we want to keep this in good spirits. So Philipp will try to be constructive. I'm sure he is with the feedback, and try to say not only what he likes and dislikes, but also what he would have done differently, and provide actionable feedback for all of you emerging managers logged in right now. And I think that's it. One last word to say thank you to the 3 GPs who agreed to be roasted. This is very brave of you, and we hope you're going to enjoy this. And having said that, Muieen, Philipp, take it away.
Thank you. So I'll start with deck number 1. Can you?
Yes, it's on the screen. Yep, we can see it.
Okay, perfect. So this seems to be a short deck, 15 pages, which I think is a perfect length. Remember that most LPs get hundreds and hundreds of decks on their tables, and will over time become relatively efficient in sort of working through them. Particularly sort of with an initial approach, I always recommend a reasonably short deck with all the salient information. You can always follow up with further detail later on. So irreverent VC, I guess. Starting with a joke: proprietary and confidential, struck out. Please share broadly. I think that's very nice, because a bit of humor lowers the sort of critical faculty of people more generally. So nice way to open the pitch straight on the sort of cover slide. Executive summary, also I like that a lot. A lot of GPs start with sort of too much detail too early on. I think it's very important to get the message across in the first couple of slides. So an executive summary is always a must. It's a little bit wordy, I would say. I would generally try to use more pictures and fewer words to get across the message. But nonetheless, I find this a very useful slide.
Oh, and so just one question about the slide we just saw.
Sure.
For the fund overview and the fees, are those normal for what you normally typically see when you're looking at emerging managers, or not?
You mean the carried interest and the fund fees? I think.
Yeah, plus the admin fee.
Yeah, it's that's probably a little bit too much detail for a cover slide. I mean, I like to have the headline numbers on there. At the end, the fees are not really going to make the difference as to whether we invest or not. Obviously, everything else being equal, fees can sort of make a difference, but it's definitely not the most important thing. If people charge premium fees, I think that needs to be very well justified. So I advise all GPs, unless you have a very, very stellar track record, very substantial track record, to just stick to standard fees. That's what we would expect.
All right, thank you.
Right, next slide. So this is sort of the level of detail I like. A table, a few headline numbers, a few company logos. I think that's a good way to go. I also like basically that the GP here basically starts with the important question: why him or her, whatever the case may be. So I think it's very important to say, why are you the right person to do this? What is your competitive advantage, etc. So this gentleman here basically talks about his marketing background and why that basically helps him to compete in this specific space. Here we go. With a few examples of deals. That's also very helpful. Right level of information here with the valuations, follow-on investments, etc. So again, sort of the right amount of detail here, which is helpful. So one of the most important things, as I said earlier, is sort of how can you compete? I mean, there's thousands of funds. There's something like 2,000 or so emerging managers these days in the US, even more globally. So what really is your angle and how you sort of stand apart is very important. I think this slide brings that out very neatly.
So then for this slide, how would you quantify it? Or is there any other information that you would want to have to kind of strengthen this?
I mean, one thing you could add basically is, sort of some examples, but that doesn't necessarily need to be sort of on this slide. That could be sort of in an appendix where you sort of illustrate where your network comes from, what the domain expertise sort of encompasses, etc. But as I said, on a high level, I think, this is a sort of a very clear message. And I think you'd always sort of dig into detail later on in the conversation. But I think it's a good level of abstraction here.
Okay.
Right, the flywheel, also a very good way of presenting things. I have to say I don't particularly like the term proprietary deal flow because it's very overused and it very rarely is proprietary. So this is a bit of sort of a boilerplate, and I would sort of be more specific about where that deal flow comes from. It's probably a little more helpful. I like the public brand presence, bit Twitter, etc. Having a very strong brand and a very public brand is very important. For instance, for deal flow, ultimately you want to sort of not be everything to everyone, but be something to someone. Have a very specific value add, build a very specific sort of public presence or brand behind that, and then become sort of the go-to fund in a specific sort of space. And having a strong public brand presence, I think, helps with that. Insider access, yes, to a certain extent, venture capital is in sort of insider's game. Here I would basically sort of question, how deep is that insider access? Is that sort of a real differentiator? So yeah, maybe sort of be a little bit more specific about what insider access sort of means to you. Services and fundraising, that's something I really like. Basically very, very specific, tangible value add for founders that will basically sort of help attract both inbound deal flow or deal flow more generally, and also help the GP basically win the right to be on the cap table. Follow-on VCs, this is sort of a lot of logos, but it is more important than you think. A lot of LPs will filter that way, basically, particularly for emerging managers, which go early, who are sort of the follow-on funds in subsequent rounds as a validator of the quality of your deals. That's particularly early or particularly important if your track record is early and you don't have sort of huge markups yet or huge exits yet. This is sort of a very early sign. So I think this is very important.
And for the validation, are you looking for if these led rounds, or are you also okay if they kind of co-lead the round?
Well, typically I would look at them to sort of be follow-on investors. So this is a small fund, $10 million fund. I wouldn't expect them to co-invest with Bessemer. I would expect them to basically bring the deal to Bessemer effectively.
Okay.
So with $10 million fund, right, small tickets, you need to be really, really early to get the ownership. So in the follow-on round after you invested, those names typically would lead the round, but that's what we would be looking for.
Got it.
Right, and again, a very clear slide. Why founders choose Irreverent. I always ask GPs, what is your pitch to founders? How do you win deals? Again, this is high level, but I like high level at this stage because it enables me quickly flicking through the pitch and getting a first opinion to sort of see what the approach is. And of course, later on in the conversation, in the due diligence process, we'd dig much deeper into this. But it's very clear. Yeah, so this is a very specific value add. As I said, the platform approach is one of many approaches. Some GPs sort of roll up their sleeves and basically talk on WhatsApp to founders the whole day and basically make introductions, etc. This is sort of more the platform approach, which is a very sort of tangible value add, as I said, which can be very valuable to founders, particularly early on in their journey, because what they should be doing is focusing on product and sales and everything that sort of clears their back in terms of other stuff that needs to be done is useful. And as I said, this is a very clear value add. So I think that's very helpful to understand what you bring to founders and how you win deals. Right, case studies are always very important. I like the founder testimonials. One of the key diligence points later on in the process that we always do is talk to founders. We don't only try to talk to founders that are basically presented in decks, but also other founders. But what founders say is the most important thing to us about GPs, because the GP's sort of biggest asset is basically his or her reputation, and more importantly, the reputation in the founder community. So to the extent that you could basically sort of show what you've done and how you've worked with founders and what they say to you or about you rather, that's a very important.
All right, and then just one thing, Philip, can you click the hide button right next to stop sharing?
Okay, I'll do that, yeah.
All right, thank you.
There we go. So same thing here, more case studies. That's very helpful. I think 3 is a good number to give a flavor. And yeah, we're already at the end of it here. So as I said, I think it's a nice, concise pitch, which contains most of the information. One of the fees I'm missing a little bit, one of the pieces of information I'm missing a little bit is portfolio construction. So this appears to be a rolling fund. I only got the deck 15 minutes before this event, so I wasn't able to verify. But even with a rolling fund, basically, it's very important to say how many investments do you do, so people or investors rather get a feel for the diversification they get or the concentration they get. So yeah, portfolio construction is a very important way for us to validate also target returns. What we basically underwrite to when we make fund investments is a 3 to 5x basically return potential, and the way we validate that is by looking at sort of how many investments do you do, what's the initial check size, what ownership do you get with that check size, how do you allocate your reserves, and then obviously make certain assumptions through sort of the life cycle of the funds investments, and basically sort of validate that way whether we believe GPs can get to a 3 to 5x return potentially on a fund. That's one of the things that I'm missing, but other than that, I have to say this is a very good and very clear pitch deck.
All right, so then one other question from the audience is, based on the deck, would you take a meeting? Would you invest? How do you feel about it?
Based on this deck, I would take a meeting.
Okay.
Obviously, there's a lot of things that we would need to dig into a lot deeper, but I would definitely take a meeting off the back of this deck.
Got it.
Right, I guess that was around about 12 minutes. Should we move on to the next one? Or are there any other questions?
No, absolutely. Thank you, Philip. That was great for the first one, and we're on time, so we can go straight to the next one. It's the one number 2, and so this one I think is the anonymous one, because sometimes for regulatory reasons you're not allowed to disclose everything. But very solid one, and I'm pretty excited about it. So whenever you want, Philip, you can put it on screen.
Okay, absolutely. Yeah, so it's anonymous. I guess the only information we get here is the fund name. I do like sort of to have a claim or some further information on the sort of cover slide. typically something that sort of triggers the interest right there and then. But this is a nice sort of fresh page. So it's.
Do you have an example of something that you would find interesting right on the cover page?
I'm sorry?
So is there an example of a piece of information that a GP can put on the cover page that would make it more enticing for you? Will it be something like track thesis?
Yeah, absolutely. No, it's just a claim. So this is the fund, this is what we do, or this is what differentiates us, or something, like a brand has a claim, like just do it, something like that. But it's not a must. It's just something to add a little bit of extra information on the cover slide.
Okay.
Right. So again, we're missing the fund name, but I do like that they open up with saying what they're doing: pre-seed venture fund backing, biotech climate solutions, etc. So I think that's a good slide. So this is obviously the opposite of some other decks where the information is very light. I noticed that this deck is quite a bit longer. So as I said earlier, I generally recommend no more than 12 to 15 slides for sort of first point of contact deck. One way to reduce the length of this deck is basically to put slightly more information, but I like the sort of visual approach. I like delineation of colors to segregate certain pieces of information. Now here we're basically starting with the problem, which is obviously good. Here we go into further detail, potentially a little too much detail, but it's very nicely visually presented, basically showing sort of the different use cases, I guess, that this GP is intending to invest in. Time is now is a very interesting one. It's with sort of any theme. We know the old saying that to be too early is the same as being wrong. So particularly with something like this, like climate tech, I guess, has a lot of momentum, but it's not a bad idea to basically point out why whatever you're doing, you're sort of in the right time and place to do that. So again, useful slide, useful information. This is obviously validating that that this is an area where there already have been some significant outcomes with certain logos. So again, useful, but we're getting sort of into the point where we sort of a little bit lengthy on sort of the market opportunity.
Would you have rather that they gave you their track record and their current investments, or to give you kind of big name brand startups that have defined the category?
Well, these are two different things. So obviously the track record is very important, and it definitely needs to be there somewhere in the presentation. What this previous slide was doing was basically validating the space and showing that there have been some big outcomes. So they're both valid. So the track record, I would definitely sort of look for a little bit later in the deck. What this particular GP missed was sort of the executive summary slide in the beginning that Reverend had, but these are two separate points for me.
Okay.
So what we're seeing here, I think we're getting a little bit lengthy about the market opportunity. Again, I would sort of compress that into a couple of slides, no more, but the information that's presented here is good. Then they rightly go into team, which is obviously the most important thing. We're investing in people, we're investing in a blind pool, so the people behind it are all important. We're showing the backgrounds here, credentials. So you can have a slide per partner, or you can again compress that a little bit. But yeah, to spend some time on the basic background of the partners is very important. Advisory council, that's also useful information because with any GP team, what they will need is sort of an extended network of advisors, venture partners, and other sort of well-meaning people to help them with insights, with diligence, with networking, with assessing specific opportunities. So to sort of show the extended team, if you will, is also important. Right, so I'm not quite sure what this parent org thing is. Obviously, or it looks like this fund was spun out of a larger organization, which potentially raises a few questions. Nonetheless, I wouldn't sort of spend too much time on this in the presentation, because it basically, as I said, it raises a lot of questions. You know, whatever, if they came out of a large organization and are trying to replicate it by themselves, will they be able to do that with a larger organization in the background? Are there still ties with the larger organization? So typically I wouldn't sort of bring up a complication or potential complication like that at this point in the presentation. So that's definitely something that will be discussed or should be discussed throughout the course of due diligence. But I wouldn't spend too much time on this, or even any, in this presentation. Right, so this is basically the deal flow page. Where does the deal flow come from? As I said, sort of that's an important point. Where do deal flows? Where does deal flow come from? This is a sort of quite detailed page, but again, makes sense to have it. Founder scouts. So they seem to have somehow incentivized founders from various companies. Again, that's really part of the sort of sourcing slide. I would sort of compress that a little bit. And this is sort of general feedback for this GP, to not have too many slides. I would basically have one slide on basically deal flow, and I would include the sort of scouting program as a part of that one slide.
Okay.
Track record, very important. I would probably require a little bit more detail. Here we have the prior investments, but at what stage were those investments done? How much was invested? Where they're basically trading on a deal-by-deal basis, or where they're valued at a deal-by-deal basis. Now, I don't particularly care if this track record has been built on 25K tickets, 250K tickets, or 2.5 million tickets. It's more a question of basically showing that you have the access that you could get into those companies, that you did spot them early. So don't be afraid to show a track record, even if it's sort of on small numbers. It's more important what you did with that sort of capital, rather than having deployed enormous amounts of capital. Obviously, if you basically only got into those deals with smaller check sizes, and then your fund becomes bigger, then the question for us LPs become basically, you know, can you get the access with that larger ticket? So if it's easier to basically accommodate a 25K angel ticket or 250K angel ticket into a round for specific value add, than, you know, doing a $1 million ticket or more in a round where you might sort of get squeezed out. But these are all details. So the message is, don't be afraid to show the track record, including the numbers, including the stage, including when investments will be done. That is something we'll be asking for later anyway, sort of the detailed schedule of investments, but don't be afraid to put it in here, because it gives LPs a good view of basically what you've done. And sort of lack of track record is a very easy way to basically, or very easy reason to basically move on from a deal and not pursue it further. So the more transparency you can basically give on a track record, the better. Right, so here we have not only a case study about the first fund investment. So particularly with first-time funds, it will help tremendously in your fundraising process if you can already show some deals. So ultimately, we're looking for the quality of the underlying companies. So this is sort of a nice slide giving a fair amount of detail about the investments that are already in the funds that the LPs will be buying into. So these are good slides to have.
And so just to note, we have 2 minutes left for this deck.
Sure. Yeah, this is a long one, so I'll hurry up a little bit. Unique value add, very important slide. The strategy is kind of important. So one thing I would sort of basically say here is the flow of the presentation is a little bit convoluted. So I would basically look at sort of the executive summary, what is the opportunity, who's the team, what's basically our value add, how do we win deals, obviously the whole sort of deal flow slides are part of that. Then it would move into track record, portfolio construction, and then sort of some sort of final slide. So I think the flow of this presentation can be improved a little bit because it's a little bit back and forth. Yeah, but since we're at the end of it, it's good information. It's pretty much all in there. It needs to be compressed, and I think the flow needs to sort of be a little bit more coherent in terms of those aspects that I just mentioned. So good presentation, needs to be sort of condensed a little bit, but it has all of the salient information in here.
Okay, and so another question, based on the deck, would you take the meeting or not? Would you invest? How do you feel about it?
I would take the meeting. As I said, I think because it's quite long, it might lose a few people with more fleeting attention spans, but I would definitely take the meeting.
Okay.
Whether I invest, that will be determined later.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Philipp, for the second one. Before we go to the third one, we have a couple questions in the chat.
Sure.
Here is from Sean. So how much capital is committed to the fund upfront, right? Should you see in the fund how much is secured already in the deck?
As to whether that's important information, how much capital has already been raised. I think it's helpful. I mean, for GPs, if you look at basically founder pitches, you will always look at sort of traction and momentum, and fundraising is a sort of pure momentum game. You need to build up that momentum. So yeah, it's helpful to show that you've already closed or how much you've already closed, whether you've had your first close. That's useful information.
All right. And the second question here, what is your advice with little to no track record?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that question, please?
So it's what is your advice for emerging managers with little to no track record?
Yeah, so I think the best advice is to build that track record. As I said, it doesn't matter too much to me what the check sizes are, but with a small amount of money, you can build an angel portfolio. I think that's a good way to do. Ultimately, what we look at, I mean, even sort of with fund ones, fund two, fund threes, we don't necessarily look at the headline numbers, like, you know, how much has been invested, what's the TVPI, blah, blah, blah. We basically look at the companies, the founding teams, and, you know, whether you manage to get, you know, wiggle your way into sort of strong founding teams and strong companies. So to the extent that you can show that with small dollars, I think that's very helpful.
Awesome. Thank you. Let's move on to the third deck. And this one, we have the name. It's actually
okay.
public.
Iron Key.
Let's do it.
There we go. Right. Iron Key Ventures, the first fully decentralized venture fund. Interesting claim. So I do like, as I said earlier, that there is a claim on the first page that tells you what the fund stands for. So this is a good example. My only comment here would be, are they actually the first fully decentralized venture fund? I don't know when they started. There's a few others that do this, but maybe more importantly, being the first is not necessarily sort of a differentiator or a value add. I mean, it shows sort of a certain sort of pioneering mentality, but just being the first doesn't necessarily make you better than others. So I would basically find sort of a different sort of description to show what really differentiates you rather than having been the first. But I like the claim on the sort of cover slide. Now, those guys are basically starting with the problem, which is a valid way to do. Again, I'm missing the executive summary that we had in the first deck. I mean, this is quite a sort of detailed slide, looking obviously at different criteria and basically ranking them. I would say this is a way too detailed slide for the second slide or the first proper slide in the pitch. So again, defining the problem is a good way to basically open the conversation. This is a little too detailed for my taste. And in any event, I would prefer to start with that executive summary. Again, quite a detailed slide. I'm not quite sure I really understand at this stage what you're trying to tell me. I mean, the different sort of LP or investor types, but again, I need a bigger picture first before we sort of dig into this level of detail.
Yeah, and I don't think would you find any of this relevant to you or not?
To be perfectly honest, before I even know sort of what this fund is really doing, I probably wouldn't even dig into this level of detail at this stage. I probably flick through fairly quickly, trying to understand the bigger picture. So this is, I mean, you get that with founding teams too. Sometimes people are sort of so entrenched and so deep into basically what they're doing. They get very detailed very quickly. For someone who's sort of new to your firm, your pitch deck, etc., you basically need to guide them, sort of in a basically on a higher level to what it is you're doing. So this is, quite detailed. That might be part of the diligence or the data room where you basically sort of break down into how it exactly works. But in terms of storytelling, this is not really a deck that's telling a story. So to be honest, this deck would lose me relatively quickly, just off the back of the level of detail. Yeah, so the community, again, quite a bit of detail, operational and legal structure for crypto venture. Again, it's sort of very technical, very early on in the pitch, and I still haven't really understood. I mean, I understand there's some sort of DAO for VC, but talking about the operational, legal, and deal structure before I've even talked about the team and the strategy and the type of deals they're looking to invest in, the sort of access question, I sort of wouldn't want to dig into that at this stage. So mission, this basically should be the first slide in my opinion, after the executive summary, starting the high level. So this is basically information I've been looking for 10 slides ago. So I would definitely bring this one up front because this actually tells me what you're doing. Enterprise adoption of Web3. So we're sort of flipping back on sort of different levels of abstraction relatively quickly, from quite detailed operational legal deal structure sort of considerations to very detailed to mission, which is obviously a big sort of chunking up exercise and going straight back into enterprise adoption of Web3. So I like a sort of pitch to be basically organized either micro to macro or macro to micro, start with the bigger picture, and then sort of boil down in sort of the level of abstraction, or sort of start on a lower level, like these are the companies that we think have sort of great potential, and then work up from there. But I think in any sort of presentation, there needs to be sort of one direction from high level to detail, or from detail to high level. Either can work, but you cannot really jump back and forth too much. It loses people's attention. So again, going to a relatively high level slide back from the sort of previous more detailed level of slides. So this is definitely also a slide that I would have brought up front. So I probably would have started with mission statement. This could have been a good second slide. Again, high level. What are we doing? Deep tech AI, global state-free money, etc. So you need to sort of come from the higher level and then sort of gradually work your way down to more detailed levels of abstraction. Okay, fundraising summary. So I would say the sort of high level feedback here is, the flow of this presentation is not right. I mean, it's a lot of detail in there. It needs to be organized. It needs to basically be organized into a narrative. So this is, and this is, those guys, I'm sure they know exactly what they're doing. It's more of a question of how do you communicate it. I mean, not every LP, I mean, we've done a few investments in that space, but not every LP is like deep into Web3 and stuff like that. So you really need to sort of, capture people in a way that is sort of understand what you're doing and follow what you're doing. Sort of, in a more storytelling way, I guess.
Okay, and so just because they're a crypto fund, would you expect them to talk about everything that's happened with FTX over the past month, or should they not touch on that at all?
I wouldn't necessarily touch on that in the presentation. I mean, this is a sort of very general, sort of high-level question, into how the FTX collapse will impact the sort of crypto space more broadly. It's not really specific to this fund. It's not something I would dig into in a sort of presentation.
Okay.
That's sort of more of a verbal conversation, I guess, once you have a call. Right, and only now on slide, I don't know how many, we get to the actual people behind it. As I said, sort of in the previous pitch, we need to bring the people relatively far up front. So sort of mission statement, this is the strategy, this is what we do. And then the most important thing is the people behind it. So this is definitely something that needs to be brought up front. Right, I realize we're running out of time. I want to leave some time for questions. So as I said, I'm sure those guys know what they're doing, but in terms of the pitch, it's sort of way too sort of convoluted, way too heavy on detail. I think you'll lose this pitch. You'll lose a lot of people, potential LPs specifically, quite early on in the process. So this could do with a sort of lot more streamlining, organizing, bring it up to a high level of abstraction and into a sort of better flow and better narrative. So I think I'll leave it here. There's still quite a few more slides. Again, sort of the target, I think, length of the deck should be 12 to 15 slides. And there's no way else you can get this amount of detail into 12 to 15 slides. So again, reduce sort of the level of detail, bring out the bigger picture, and compress the information into fewer slides.
All right.
Right.
Thank you, Philip.
Are there any more?
Yeah, we have a few questions. So first, thank you for this roast. It's very structured and detailed roast. And I'm going through the questions. We have a couple, actually. We had one question about the amount of commitment from the GP. Does that give you more confidence as a LP to invest if a GP has, a higher commitment, relative to the size of the fund, for example?
Yeah, not really, to be honest. So, I mean, GP commitment is supposed to symbolize skin in the game. There are many ways to do that. Obviously, if we have a very sort of a GP that was previously very successful and should have a lot of cash in their bank, it would be a question mark if they didn't sort of put a large check into their own fund. Having said that, there are a lot of GPs that have been very successful but haven't had the liquidity yet, because you know of the length of the cycles. So then we would obviously take that into consideration. But as I said, skin in the game is also about opportunity costs. If you have a small fund and have standard fees, there's good alignment of interest. I know GP needs to perform to make any money out of that. So that's also good alignment. So we don't overweight GP commitment. It's very, it needs to be significant for that person, for the GP, but there's more than GP commitment to sort of, basically illustrate the commitment.
And especially for first time, because this was a question, I didn't read it properly. For the first time fund manager, is that something you look at, and what within the number that you want to see, in value or in percentage?
There needs to be something. It can't be zero, but it doesn't need to be a big number, because also we know that a lot of GPs basically use the management fee and to fund that, and the management fee is there, to build a team, to build a firm that can basically deliver the access. It should basically be used to flow into GP commitments. So as I said, for first-time managers with limited track record, we don't expect to see huge GP commitments.
Okay. Another question, it's about the concept of track record. Would experience within an industry be sufficient as a track record, especially for founders turned GP? I don't know if you can see on the screen. You have it here.
Well, here I'm a little bit more critical, because sort of operational success and investment success are basically two very different disciplines. You could be the most successful serial entrepreneur on the planet, wouldn't necessarily make you a good investor, and vice versa. We actually like GP teams that actually are comprised of both an experienced investor and an experienced operator. But industry expertise or operational experience wouldn't necessarily be enough, because, as I said, investing is a very different discipline than building a company.
Got it. And I think this is our last question from Olivier, I guess a fellow French guy. Hey. Is it a good time to raise a first-time fund given the macroeconomics?
Good question. I think it's getting better. I think 2022 was probably the worst time in a while to raise capital, and the major problem was basically deployment was so fast last year, 2021, that a lot of people deployed faster, came back to the market earlier, and therefore basically most LPs that I know were basically for the first half of the year sort of head down in re-ups, didn't have the attention to focus on new names. And then they were basically had spent their budget at the end of that and didn't have any more money to deploy in the second half of the year. So I think this year was extremely difficult for emerging managers. I think sort of that backlog is going to clear up. There are going to be fresh budgets in 2023. It should be getting easier, but I think 2023 is still going to be a difficult year for venture capital. But you'd probably be fundraising 12 to 18 months at the minimum. So to start.
So no easy money. It's not going to rain. Not yet.
Not yet.
Not yet. Okay. All right. Thank you, Muieen. Thank you, Philipp. This was great. Great first.
I hope it was helpful. And please, anyone feel free to reach out to me with any follow-up questions or anything else I can help with.
Absolutely. And I see Andrew in the chat was asking how to get in touch. We'll take care of that by email.
Please feel free to distribute my contact details.
Awesome. So, thanks, Philipp.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks very much.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good day. Bye-bye.